Hello everybody, I'm Silly. This will be part 5, chapter 5 of Through the Eyes of a Quirkless Child. I am gonna say some warnings before I do actually start the story, just because this episode plays heavily into some of the trigger warnings. Please take time out of your day to actually go and look at those in the description, and if any of those bother you, please click off now. Your health comes first. But if you choose to stay, please enjoy the story. Izuku woke up in what could only be described as gamer heaven. He looked around as he sat up, taking everything in with a trained gaze. He had been laying on a large, soft bed with a plain black comforter and pillows to match. Partially hidden beneath the blanket, resting its head on a fluffy pillow, was a small Eraserhead plush. Izuku snorted out a laugh at that. It was obvious now whose room he was in. Pulling his gaze away from the bed, he looked to the large wall-mounted TV across from him. Flat screen, way fancier than anything Izuku had ever seen before, and it hung above a small console table. On the table were more games than Izuku recognized, stacks upon stacks, dozens of them. A twinge of jealousy stabbed at him, and he immediately shoved it down. No point in wishing for things he knew he could never have. No point in wishing for a life that would never be his. With a sigh, Izuku kept looking around. In front of the TV, a little ways away from the bed, was a black couch. He could only see the back of it, but despite that, the Eraserhead blanket hanging off the side was obvious. Man, Shigaraki must really like Aizawa. He almost gagged at that. He didn't want to know just how far the villain's obsession with his homeroom teacher went. Ignorance is bliss. He shook his head, as if to physically get the thought out of his mind, and continued looking around the room. Covering the walls were posters, some of which he didn't recognize. But the ones he did were surprising. Cozy games, RPGs, sandbox games. Not what he'd expect from the leader of the League of Villains. Some of them were even signed. By who or what their significance was, Izuku didn't know. But still, they were obviously important enough to get a signature from. Alongside those posters were dark wooden wall shelves, packed to the weight limit with figurines, manga, plushes, and replicas of things from video games and anime. It had really started to sink in just how much of a nerd Shigaraki was. Not that Izuku was much better, but still. In the opposite corner of the room from the bed was a large, L-shaped desk. There was an absolute beast of a desktop computer, clear on one side with 3 monitors attached. For whatever reason, one of the monitors was vertical. Also on the desk was a huge box, overflowing with artist gloves, the kind that only cover the pinky and ring finger. Wow, Izuku thought. That's really smart. He knew there were special gloves made for people with 5-point touch quirks, but none of them would probably work when the moment he put them on, they would decay. Artist gloves were a smart solution. Izuku felt something warm. If he didn't know better, he would say pride, bloom in his chest at seeing the creative solution Shigaraki used. The man was smarter than people gave him credit for. Much like himself, a small voice said in the back of his mind. Next to the box of gloves was a collection of lotion bottles. He could faintly read that they were all prescription. A lot of them were empty, but you wouldn't be able to tell looking at Shigaraki that he apparently used prescription-strength moisturizing lotion. In the trash can on the floor, there were a number of those bottles that looked like they'd been to hell and back. Some were partially disintegrated, some had burn marks, and some were torn open as if some feral animal had desperately needed dry skin relief. Izuku didn't want to know what events had led to the mutilation of those bottles. Rainbow LED lights bordered the top of the room, gliding softly between colors in a way that, despite the obnoxious colors, wasn't irritating. It was almost soothing. The whole room was dimly lit, cast in a gentle rainbow light. The stillness, the silence, made the whole room look as if it was pulled from a dream. Izuku wondered for a moment how the League managed to get all this stuff. How they managed to be so secure in one location, considering their villain status. He thought for a minute, and pushed the thoughts aside with a sigh. It was probably something to do with Krogiri's warp, he figured, and continued looking around the room. There were no windows, no ceiling light, no closet, and only one door leading outside. That knowledge didn't exactly boost his confidence in escaping or being found, but oh well. Finally, underneath the desk was a large collection of pillows, blankets, and one very large, you guessed it, Eraserhead plush. It looked cozy, soft, and quiet, the perfect place to curl up and read a book. Izuku couldn't help but be jealous. He'd never had so many decorations in his room at home, and he definitely never had any sort of computer or game console. The only reason he had a phone was so his mother could track him and make sure he didn't cause too much trouble at school. He had tried explaining to her that he wasn't the one who started things, he was the target, but she never really listened. He didn't blame her. If he had just kept his head down, not antagonized any of his classmates, he wouldn't have gotten hurt so much. His injuries were always his fault, just like everything else that went wrong. Interrupting that thought, Shigaraki quietly opened the door and tiptoed in, pushing it closed carefully behind him. He turned around, looking at the bed, and startled a bit as he made eye contact with Izuku. Clearly, he had expected Izuku to be asleep.
"Hey, brat. You're finally ready to wake up?"
Shigaraki asked with a smirk, condescending and yet still more gentle than the villain's typical persona. What? Huh? What do you mean? How long have I been asleep? Deku began to panic. Had he been sleeping longer than he thought? He initially assumed it was only a couple hours, but based on the stiffness in his joints, maybe not. Shigaraki hesitated a moment before answering, pulling out his phone to, presumably, check the time or date.
"About a day and a half. We kidnapped you Wednesday night. It's Friday morning now,"
Shigaraki said, looking up from his phone. He wasn't expecting to see Izuku already crying. Damn it, he thought they'd gotten past that.
"Whoa, kid, calm down. I know it's not ideal to be with us, of all people, but it's damn near better than where you've been before. No need to cry. It's all right."
Shigaraki looked very uncomfortable now, his gloved hands held up defensively. Izuku began hyperventilating, his hands clenched and twisted painfully. Shigaraki heard the bones begin to crunch, watching as Izuku's face contorted with pain as well as panic. Shigaraki breathed out a curse and grabbed a bottle of lotion off his desk in the corner. He grimaced, hesitating for a moment before he spread lotion all over his hands and gloves, effectively ruining them. That was the least pressing issue currently, though, as Shigaraki gently pulled Izuku's hands apart.
"I'm going to massage your hands now, okay, Izuku? It'll help ground you. And I know it hurts when they crack like that, so please let me help."
The end of his sentence came out as a question, unintentionally revealing Shigaraki's unfamiliarity with the situation. He hadn't ever dealt with someone else's panic attack before. Usually Magne or Twice stepped in to help other members of the League, but he was alone with the kid in here, and he would help Izuku if it was the last thing he did. It was his quest, after all, to keep him safe and happy. That meant helping with panic attacks, no matter how inexperienced he was. Izuku nodded, still gasping for air through his tears. And so, Shigaraki began gently kneading the kid's hands. He started with the palm and moved outward, gently pushing each joint and small bone back into place. Sickening pops and snaps filled the room as Shigaraki massaged his hands. But the relieved look on the kid's face made it bearable. He continued soothing Izuku's hands, even after the tears stopped and his breathing returned to normal. Only after Izuku suddenly began to pull his hands back did Shigaraki stop.
Feeling better. I knew you had broken your hands a couple times, but holy shit! I didn't expect that.
Shigaraki went straight to the throat of the problem, now that Izuku had calmed down. It's not all that bad, really. I just slip my bones out of place sometimes. Something to do with connective tissue, I think. Recovery Girl just told me not to break anything again, or she wouldn't heal it with her quirk. Izuku laughed at that, as if her threatening to withhold treatment was just a mild inconvenience or a joke. Whether or not she meant it, even someone like Shigaraki knew that it was beyond irresponsible and an abuse of power to hold things like that over a child's head as a threat or insensitive. Izuku must have sensed Shigaraki's anger at Recovery Girl, and he rushed to defend her. No, it's not her fault. I'm the one who doesn't have control over my quirk. It's not her fault I keep breaking things. She decides how she uses her quirk, and if she's tired of using it on my broken bones all the time, I can't blame her. Izuku said this as if it was a fact, as if it was reasonable. That alone made Shigaraki bristle with anger even more. This poor kid was so used to being walked over that he would make excuses for anyone who did it. Even go as far as to defend them. Shigaraki knew what they had been told before Izuku passed out, but he had a feeling it went deeper than just that. One or two bad incidents of quirklessness discrimination would alter a person's entire self-view. It would take hundreds of incidents, a lifetime of being told he was less than garbage.
She's a doctor. It's not only her moral obligation, but her job. To heal everyone she can. That includes you. If she were to refuse to heal the injuries of any of your friends, you wouldn't tell them that it was their fault, would you? Would you tell them they deserve to suffer the same way you tell yourself that, huh?
Shigaraki was barely containing his frustration, scratching his neck feverishly as the skin grew raw and burned an angry red. Izuku opened his mouth as if to argue, but stopped before he said anything. Maybe Shigaraki was right? If Uraraka told him that Recovery Girl refused to heal her, he would be furious. He would go straight to Nezu and demand something be done about it. So, why wouldn't he do the same for himself? Why couldn't he? Did he deserve the same treatment he gave other people? Did he deserve to be given kindness? Obviously not. Why would he? He was just a useless Deku. He would never amount to more than that. He would never make it past 25. All the quirkless life expectancies said so. He would never be a hero. Kacchan told him that every day. He would never stop being a burden, a leech. His mama never let him forget. The world around him seemed to fade, shades of gray taking over where there was once vibrant color. Everything was someone else's. He was in someone else's room, someone else's body, someone else's mind. Someone else's power, their legacy forced upon him, always resting just beneath his skin. He didn't deserve any of this. He didn't deserve this life or this body or any of the poor people he deceived into being his friends. He was a fraud, manipulative, abusive, evil, pure fucking evil. His mind was coated in a thick layer of fog. He wasn't real. He was some sort of parasite, something inhuman. He was arrogant to believe he could walk alongside heroes, narcissistic and stupid and worthless fucking trash. Every word out of his mouth was another waste of time, waste of air, waste. He was disgusted by himself. What kind of monster was he? The more he thought, the more his head began to hurt. Everything hurt. And at the same time, he didn't feel any pain. He had fooled all his friends at UA into believing he was worth something. He tricked them. How fucking awful was that? He couldn't even own up to how shitty of a person, no, creature he was. Stupid beyond stupid, worthless, abusive, cruel, manipulative. Honestly, everyone would have been better off had he just sucked it up and jumped when he had the chance. Why didn't he? Was he really too selfish to do the one thing that would make everyone happy? Apparently so. Maybe, if he found another way to jump, another tall building with low foot traffic, he could finally be a hero. He was supposed to be doing something? Was he? Distantly, Izuku felt arms wrap around him in a loose grip. He wondered who they belonged to. Time passed. It could have been seconds, or minutes, or hours. He didn't know. It didn't matter in the end. All that mattered now was the pack of razor blades hidden beneath his mattress in his room. All that mattered now was getting to them, and laying down in that too small bathtub, and finally getting the rest he needed so desperately. His shame and hatred of himself only grew. He was so fucking selfish, only ever thinking about himself, crying at school as if he didn't deserve to be beaten. He asked for it, he deserved it, and it was only fair that his classmates got to take their anger out on him. It wasn't their fault they were forced to be in a class with a quirkless freak, after all. No, it was his fault. Who was he again? He had a name, maybe. Where was he? What? He was so tired, so tired. The exhaustion wore deep into his bones, surrounding his soul more with every fake smile, every forced laugh, every time his friends didn't notice. They never did. None of them saw how his smile never reached his eyes, the dark bags explained away by late-night studying, the thin white scars littering his arms and legs that he told them were from surgery. They never noticed. His vision faded completely, darkness swallowing him whole. Back in the room, outside of Izuku's mind, Shigaraki was panicking. It had been 15 minutes. The kid still hadn't responded, and whatever light was left in his eyes had fully vanished. He looked dead. What was he supposed to do now? Shigaraki hadn't ever seen someone do that, whatever it was, before, and he didn't look like Izuku was going to snap out of it anytime soon. Ugh, that's it. Magne would know what to do. Magne always knew what to do. Like how to get blood stains out of white towels, how to scramble eggs. She even remembered all of their birthdays. Yeah. She would fix the kid and everything would go back to normal. Shigaraki gave Izuku one long hug before rushing out of the room and down the hall to the door with a bright red M on it. Kurogiri had insisted they all label their rooms after Dabi had gone into Shigaraki's room instead of his own while he was trying to do a handstand like the ladies on the yoga tape, which had naturally led to a massive fight. Anyways, not the point. Shigaraki knocked harshly with both hands on the door, non-stop, until she opened it. Shiggy, what the hell could possibly be so important that you need to break down my door at 8:45 in the morning on a Friday? Magne was still dressed in her puppy print pajamas, courtesy of Toga, and was obviously not in the mood for whatever shenanigans she assumed he was up to.
The kid, Midoriya, he's like dead or something. I don't know what happened, but he just kinda stopped talking, and now he looks like a corpse. And he won't move or blink, and I think I killed him? Please help.
Shigaraki was out of breath by the time he finished his plea, more than frazzled and desperate for help. He had never been good with kids, especially not with ones that apparently have a power-off function. Magne's eyes widened slightly, and she shoved past Shigaraki to run down the hall like Satan himself was on her tail. Whatever was going on with Izuku, obviously it wasn't good. But maybe she had a way to fix it, Shigaraki thought. He followed behind her, turning into his room 3 doors down from Magne's. By the time he got there, Magne was already kneeling in front of Izuku, holding his hands. She was making eye contact with him, but he just looked through her, as if no one was there at all. "Hey, Izuku, can you hear me? It's Magne," she said to him in a soft voice, a gentle smile on her face. Shigaraki couldn't stop wondering what was happening. All he did was ask Izuku a question, and the next moment he, checked out? Izuku didn't move a muscle. It hardly looked like he was breathing. Magne sat with him for a few more minutes before she rose to her feet again. She sighed heavily and turned to Shigaraki. "He's fully dissociated, and I don't have the qualifications for this. I can handle mild dissociation, I can handle panic attacks, but this kid is too far gone for me to do anything," Magne said, her brows furrowing in concern. Alright then. Shigaraki would have to pull out the big guns. When all else failed, Sensei knew how to fix things. Sensei knew everything. He had been around for so long, had so many quirks. There was nothing he couldn't do, no one he couldn't help. Shigaraki unlocked his phone and sent a text to Kurogiri demanding, a portal to Sensei's private office. It took another minute of arguing over text, but eventually the warp villain relented and formed a portal in Shigaraki's room. Kurogiri didn't seem to think Sensei would be able to help, but he didn't know Sensei like Shigaraki did. He would be able to fix it, to make everything better again. It's what he did for Shigaraki himself, after all. Through the fog of disassociation, Izuku felt familiar arms, warm, safe arms, pick him up and carry him into a cold, dark something. That something, too, was familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. It felt important for some reason. He watched the scenery change, dark and light grays blurring together into new shapes. The arms holding him up gently set him down, and wherever he was warm. None of this really got through to him, though. Izuku was drowning in his thoughts, far away from reality. He thought of nothing but how much he hated himself, how badly he wanted to rest, how much of a burden he was on others, how evil he was, how manipulative. He was practically a villain. All Might would have been right to kill him. All he does is lie. His thoughts were cut short. He didn't know how long it had been, but he was awake now, and wherever he was, it definitely wasn't Shigaraki's room. Alright, everybody, that concludes Part 5, Chapter 5 of Through the Eyes of a Quirkless Child. Please make sure to check out the Discord if you haven't already. If you would like to get updates easier, get connected with people within the fanfiction community, make requests for a podfic, and more. The link to the server will be in the description. Now I hope you enjoyed and thank you for listening.